On that fateful day, when Beyond the Gates reached episode 98, everything began to veer off an already murky trajectory. It was no longer just distant stares or hesitant words, but an eruption of long-suppressed secrets, as those who once played the roles of loved ones, confidants, and protectors began to reveal deep fractures in their true selves. Tyrell and Samantha, once considered the calm pillars of the family, started to clearly feel they were trapped in a tightening web of lies. Half-hearted conversations, sidelong glances, unfinished sentences, and clumsy, anxious gestures made it impossible for them to feign ignorance any longer. They had grown tired of enduring, tired of standing in the shadows, and decided to direct their questions squarely at those who had kept them in the dark. And then the truth began to surface, like a blade cutting into the heart of the family. Martin, the man once seen as their foundation, began to unravel, no longer able to maintain the facade he had carefully upheld for years. In a painful moment at the dinner table mid-meal, Martin confessed a small part of the iceberg he had buried beneath a layer of false peace. Not because he wanted to, but because the weight of his guilt had become unbearable. He spoke of Smitty, of losing Tyrell and Samantha, and of how his efforts to protect ultimately led to destruction. The confession was incomplete, but enough to leave the siblings reeling. What they didn't yet know was that Martin had killed a man years ago and covered it up with Vernon's help. But Martin withheld that part, clutching it like a wound that refused to close. Guilt boiled in his veins, corroding what little humanity remained. No matter how tough he tried to appear, the burden was destroying the very family he once fought to preserve. Meanwhile, on a completely different rhythm, Pamela began weaving strange threads in the dark. To Danny, she wasn't just a mysterious woman. She was the embodiment of a complex game where no one could tell the difference between an offer and a trap. On a quiet rooftop, with a bottle of wine and her familiar half-smile, Pamela engaged in a wordless yet loaded conversation with Danny. She spoke of fire, of its allure, and of the consequences that come from not knowing how to control it. To Danny, it wasn't just a proposition. It was a deadly sweet warning. He was intrigued, yet alert enough to sense that what was unfolding was more than just an opportunity. Pamela seemed to be testing the boundaries of trust and control, subtly nudging Danny toward something larger, deeper, and far more dangerous. Viewers couldn't take their eyes off Pamela, especially in recent episodes, where she moved to an almost surreal rhythm, raising questions about her true intentions. Was this all a calculated performance, or a mental breakdown masked with precision? Katie, who plays Pamela, split the fanbase with her portrayal. Some believed she was elevating the role, turning Pamela into a captivating and enigmatic icon. Others felt it was overly theatrical, more suited for stage than screen. Yet regardless of opinion, Pamela held the audience spellbound. Her interactions with Danny grew increasingly personal, even showing signs of subtle manipulation, emotional control pushing beyond safe limits. In another branch of the story, Haley began to spiral into complete disorientation. When the truth about Madison's pregnancy came to light, it wasn't just a shock, it was a suspended sentence hanging over her head. Bill, once her only remaining anchor, grew colder and more distant, leaving Haley in a state of utter helplessness. She scrutinized his every move, every step, every silent departure from the house, afraid that he knew everything and was simply waiting for the right moment to crush her. Paranoia slowly consumed Haley, blurring the line between reality and imagination. She envisioned being exposed, stripped bare, abandoned. But Bill didn't act as she feared. He remained cold, silent, revealing nothing. And that drove Haley even more insane. She couldn't tell if he planned to destroy her in front of everyone or torment her silently, until she self-destructed. Amid the chaos, Martin appeared once again, alone in the aging hallway of what used to be a home. He stood there, staring at an old family photo, a moment frozen before the lies, before the blood. It showed a different Martin, a different father, a different man. Tyrell and Samantha stood quietly on the stairs, watching him, unsure if the man they once respected ever truly existed. They didn't know what would come next, but they knew everything had changed forever. Pamela, meanwhile, silently watched Danny's retreating figure, her face unreadable, but her eyes glowing with satisfaction. Had she succeeded in planting something inside his mind? Was everything she did not out of kindness, but to serve a greater, darker purpose? Amid a family unraveling, relationships warping, and shadowy figures manipulating the board, Beyond the Gates is no longer just a story of revealed secrets. It is a covert war between people who once loved each other, once protected each other, now consumed by doubt, pain, and the suffocating twists of fate. You in the future. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. TV Soak news and spoilers for more updates on Beyond the Gates.